Hey, it's Jerri Ward back for another show of I Object, Justice Examined. And I have a wonderful guest here who I'm honored to be able to interview and whose writings I have followed for several years now. And I think that he is one of the best writers and one of the best commentators that we have around, and he's also now a candidate for the presidency. He is the nominee of the Constitution Party for this year. It's Chuck Baldwin. He's also the founder, pastor of Crossroads Baptist Church in Pensacola, Florida, and he is the host of a lively, hard-hitting syndicated radio talk show on the Genesis Communications Network called Chuck Baldwin Live. He also was the vice presidential candidate for the Constitution Party in 2004, and I'm very pleased to welcome Pastor Chuck Baldwin to the show. Thank you for being with me, Pastor Baldwin.
Jerry Lynn, it's great to be with you. Thank you for letting me come on your program.
Well, let me ask you, do you prefer to be addressed by Pastor or Dr. Baldwin?
Just call me Chuck. How about that?
Okay, I'll call you Chuck. It'll probably be the first and only time I've ever been able to call a presidential nominee by his first name. So,
well, please call me Chuck. Thank you.
Well, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself? What have you been doing the last few years? You're a pastor of a church, and what got you interested in politics?
Well, I guess I had my first taste back in the 1980s when Dr. Jerri Falwell, who was a personal friend of mine, I was in his first graduation class there at what is now known as Liberty University back in 1975. And the school was very small then. And Jerry and I became real close friends. And he asked me if I would serve as the executive director of the Florida Moral Majority. And I agreed to do so. And I traveled with Jerry, and we went all over the state of Florida registering voters, and over, I guess, 50,000, 60,000 brand new voters we registered back in those days. I traveled with him extensively. So that would have been my baptism into the, if you want to say, the political process. But I think really it was the election of Bill Clinton in 1992 that really awakened me to the fact that, yes, I'm a pastor, and I'm a good citizen. I vote, and I take my citizenship responsibly, et cetera. But at the same time, it dawned on me, that as a citizen, I have a duty to my country just as much as any other American. And just because I'm an ordained minister doesn't mean I gave up my citizenship. And so I figured, the country really is in turmoil right now. And I thought about it. I prayed about it. I deliberated for 2 years, and that's when I started my radio talk show in 1994. Was part of that great revolution. We were very instrumental in helping to elect Joe Scarborough from our district. Now he's MSNBC commentator,
right,
to Congress. And from there, the syndicated columns came later. And but I think that was the thing that awakened me to the fact that no matter who we are, whether we're Christians or non-Christians, whether we're in the professional world or the blue-collar world, doesn't matter where we are, we're all citizens of this country. We all have a responsibility, yes, to our families and to our duties, but also to be the citizens that we ought to be for the survival of our country. So, in a real brief nutshell, that's kind of how I came to be what I'm doing.
Well, you mentioned the moral majority with Jerri Falwell, and one thing about that movement, it was really for this, at least for that century, for the 1900s, that was pretty groundbreaking because Christians had not been involved in politics, and he was one of the leaders of getting Christians actively involved in government instead of them just holding back and saying that they're of this world but not in this world. And was that one of your motivating factors? Is the fact that Christians should be involved in the political process so that we can impact it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Edmund Burke said, all that's necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And, we're all citizens of our country, regardless of our our personal faith or lack thereof. And, I think during all that, too, it really gave me a desire to study my history. When I say my history, I mean our history as a country, and constitutional government. So I really dug into that very deeply. And I studied our history. I studied the writings of the Founding Fathers and the Federalist Papers. I studied Constitution and all of the, everything I could get my hands on. I just devoured it. And I came away with a real education as to how far removed our nation has taken itself from those founding principles. And I really believe that we are now teetering on the edge of the loss of constitutional government, individual liberty, and our national independence. I think we're just holding on by a thread. And when I was approached by the Constitution Party, I supported Ron Paul in the primaries extensively. And if he had won the nomination, I doubt very seriously that I would be doing what I'm doing today. But he did not. And the Constitution Party came to me, actually, and asked me if I would put my name in nomination. And, again, I had to really think about that, but I eventually did. And to my surprise, they nominated me by an overwhelming majority of the delegates at their national convention in April in Kansas City. In Kansas City. And so here I am, and I really think that when you look at the two major party candidates today, whether it's Barack Obama or John McCain, you're looking at two peas in the same pod. There's really no difference in terms of the overall agenda. And my study of history and my study of the Constitution leads me to believe that if we do not return very quickly to our founding principles, our country as we know it will not long exist.
Well, I was very pleased when I started reading your columns about Ron Paul, because I also am a Ron Paul supporter and worked hard to try to get him the nomination at the grassroots level. So I was very pleased about that. And also, one thing that I want everyone out there to know is the documents that you studied that you just mentioned. Haven't you gathered those together and in a volume so that people may read those same documents?
Yes, thank you. We call it the Freedom Documents. That was interesting how that came about. I was in my quest to devour all of these documents. I just knew there had to be a book, one title, one volume that had the majority of these great documents in one place. And I looked and looked, and I found 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 there. I thought, I can't believe this. And I, to my chagrin, I could not find a volume where all of these documents were included under one title. So we set out to do that, and it took us over a year, about a year and a half actually, to compile them and to get them all typed and edited and so forth. And we put them together. We call it the Freedom Documents, and it's the only place anywhere in America that I know you can get these. And I know because I've looked. And that is, available only through my radio show. And people can go to my website, chuckbaldwinlive.com, and they can order those. But that was a result of my study and my research, and not being able to find them. There's nothing unique about it. It's the same documents that you can read, in different places. The only thing unique about it is the fact that we've compiled them in one volume under one title.
And, again, that can be found at chuckbaldwinlive.com.
chuckbaldwinlive.com, that's right.
And I would recommend everybody go and order those documents because I think they're crucial to everyone's education, and I think they're especially useful for homeschoolers. Very much so. They're very popular among homeschoolers, and they're popular among school teachers of all kinds, public and private. The Supreme Court of the state of Tennessee a year or so ago ordered several copies for their staff there at the Supreme Court in Tennessee. We've had judges, that have ordered them. We've had parents, homeschoolers, teachers of every sort, military personnel. I had a retired Marine Corps colonel that ordered a couple copies here just a few months ago. And again, we're trying to get the American people to become reacquainted with their history.
And I've had so many people say, they start reading those documents, and there's very little commentary. There's just a little synopsis in the front of each one, a little background information, and then it's just word for word the document itself. And as people read those documents, I've had so many testimonies come back to me and say, Chuck, as I read these documents, I just get fired up. I just want to stand up and salute the flag, and I want to get out and do something for my country, and I realize how great it is, and there's nothing like reading the true history of America to really give you an appreciation for who we are, what we are as a country, as a people. And then it also, I think, serves to awaken us as to how far gone we have been here in this last several decades, and how important it is that we really stand up now to reclaim, what we are as a people.
Well, let's talk about that awakening, because we already talked about the fact that Christians awoke during the 1980s and decided that they needed to start taking back over society and politics and things of that nature. And as you know, most of those Christian conservatives gravitated to the Republican Party. And here you're running for a third party, the Constitution Party. Why don't you tell the folks all the ways that you believe that the Republican Party has let down social and Christian conservatives, and is there even a conservative movement left?
Yeah. In the Republican Party, I would say there's not a conservative movement left. I don't even think that most of the Republicans today really understood what that word conservative really means. I'll maybe get back to that in a minute. But, I think if you look, Ronald Reagan came to office at least proclaiming a conservative message. Now, I think there's a lot of room to argue that, especially in his second term, he abandoned some of the commitment to those conservative principles. But nevertheless, his rhetoric, his message to the American people was a conservative message. And that's been the last Republican nominee that has proclaimed what you would call a traditional conservative message. George Herbert Walker Bush did not. George Bush II has not. These fellows have taken the Republican Party as far away from true conservatism as you can possibly imagine.
Well, wait a minute. G.W. Bush came in proclaiming that he was a conservative and, in fact, a conservative born-again Christian.
Yeah, that's right. He did come into power professing that, but as soon as he took office, his policies were in diametric the opposite of what he proclaimed. When you look at almost any issue, you'll find that there's very little difference between what George W. Bush has done and what any Democrat would do if they were in the White House. So by 2004, I had enough. I said, that's it. This party has left me. The principles that I believed can no longer, they're no longer welcome in the Republican Party. I have no home in this party anymore. And so I began to look around. Is there a political party out there among the independents that I could call home? Is there a party that has the values and principles that I have? And I found the Constitution Party. I read the platform very carefully. I talked with people that were leaders among the party, and I realized, yes, here is a party where the Constitution of the United States is honored and revered, where the fundamental principles of our nation are still the driving force of this party. And that's the party I wanted to be a part of. So I became part of this party in 2004.
Well, I want to explore that in many ways, but one thing I want to get back to the Republican Party, because now I believe that they are attempting to scare us into voting for McCain based on a claim that that Obama will win if we don't, mm-hmm. and that Obama will appoint justices to the Supreme Court who would be a disaster. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah. They do this every 4 years, though, Jerri. I mean, every 4 years. Last time it was John Kerry. He was the monster. He was the boogeyman. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter who it is. They trot out this straw man, this boogeyman scenario, and the world's going to come to an end if the Democrats elected. And they try to scare, and they do. They do scare conservatives and Christians many times into voting for, quote-unquote, the lesser of two evils. I'm reminded of a scripture that says that God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. And I think sometimes we've lost our sound-mindedness, and any time we give way to fear, we always lose our sound-mindedness. And on the judges, for example, I mean, is that the only issue? And that's about it. You know, I hear these Republicans talking about how that we got to elect John McCain, and about the only thing they have left is the judges, because they know that John McCain has no fidelity to virtually any other of the conservative principles that conservatives historically have believed in. So they resort back to this, well, you know, at least he's going to give us good judges. And that's a joke. Let me give you some examples. Remember, it was John McCain who voted for Stephen Breyer on the Supreme Court. It was John McCain who voted for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, ACLU lawyer Ruth Bader Ginsburg. John McCain voted for her. It was John McCain who was one of the Gang of 14 who got up in front of the American people and said, we promise to oppose pro-life conservative justices to the court. Now, conservatives have forgotten all of that. Now, for the sake of winning an election for the Republican Party, they're willing to swallow this fantasy that John McCain is going to appoint all these wonderful judges. Let's go back to 1973 with that infamous Roe versus Wade decision. January 22nd of that year, the court ruled basically that abortion on demand would be legal in this country. And ever since then, 40 million unborn babies have been killed in their mother's wombs, all right? As the court was constituted in 1973, there were 7 justices who had been appointed by Republican presidents, and there were only 2 justices that were appointed by Democrat presidents. You look at it today, and that is still that same ratio. It's still a 7-2 Republican appointed court over Democrat appointed court. The Republicans have controlled the Supreme Court for the last 30-plus years. Every time I hear Republicans complaining about the court, complaining about the judges, they need to go look themselves in the mirror, because they are the ones that have controlled the Supreme Court for the last 3 decades.
And we still have Roe versus Wade on the table.
We still have Roe versus Wade. And not only that, the Republicans controlled the entire federal government for 6 years, from 2000 to 2006. The White House, the House, and the Senate. They had it all. And what did they do? They didn't do anything about Roe v. Wade. They did nothing about abortion on demand. They look at what they did to spending. You got to go back to Lyndon Johnson to find the spending, the out-of-control spending that took place under George Bush and the Republicans in Congress.
Exactly.
Ron Paul, every year, would introduce, Jerri Lynn, his Sanctity of Life Act. Every year, it would sit there and gather dust and die. Wouldn't even make it to committee, much less out of committee. And that is the bill
that would strip jurisdiction of the abortion issue from the federal judiciary.
That's exactly right. It would do 2 things. It would, number one, it would identify every unborn child as being a person under the law from the moment of conception. Number 2, it would remove abortion from the jurisdiction of the court under Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, which is the right of the Congress to do. If the Republicans were truly pro-life, as they proclaimed to be for all those years from 2000 to 2006, if Bush was truly pro-life, they would have passed Ron Paul's Sanctity of Life Act, and Roe v. Wade would be overturned, and abortion on demand would be illegal today, but they did nothing.
Well, I think it's crazy to trust judges and lawyers to overturn something like that anyway, and that's one thing I want to talk a little bit about when we come back, because even with the appointment of the 2 new justices, we came out with not that great opinion in the partial birth abortion case, which you wrote about, and I want to discuss when we come back. We're coming up on a hard break, so everybody please stay over as I interview my guest, Dr. Chuck Baldwin, who is a candidate for presidency of the Constitution Party. Stay tuned.